Today we'll be looking at Proverbs chapter 11, verses 14 to 17. Proverbs is well known for being a book of wisdom. Proverbs is a book of practical knowledge. Common sense is part of wisdom. Today we will look at some proverbs people often react to when hearing with, "Duh, that's a no-brainer." Yet people often go against the common sense, practical knowledge of these proverbs. Here's Proverbs chapter 11, verses 14 to 17. Where there is no guidance, the people fall, but in abundance of counselors there is victory. He who is a guarantor for a stranger will surely suffer for it, but he who hates being a guarantor is secure. A gracious woman attains honor, and a ruthless man attain riches. The merciful man does himself good, but the cruel man does himself harm. The proverb in verse 14 often gets the duh, no-brainer reaction from people, especially young people. Solomon is saying this proverb to his son as a young man. This proverb is speaking more about pride and self-reliance, I don't need anyone attitude that many people have. The naiveness of young people often leads them to disregard this proverb until they do fall. Seeking guidance from others, especially people known for wisdom, is a smart thing to do. When we are young, we all have a tendency to see ourselves as being greater than we are and for not seeing the limitations we have. Seeking guidance from people who know us is smart because they know our strengths and weaknesses, often much better than we know ourselves. It is pride in self that blinds us to our limitations and helps push us into falling. Here is an example from the Bible of a person not listening to guidance. The example is Pharaoh of Egypt in Exodus chapter 8, verses 18 to 19. The magicians tried with their secret arts to bring forth gnats, but they could not. So there were gnats on man and beast. Then the magician said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he did not listen to them as the Lord had said. Up to this time, each of the plagues that Moses had done, up to this plague of the gnats, the magicians of Egypt were able to copy to some degree. But they could not produce gnats. Pharaoh believed he had the power of a god with a small g. Pride in his position as Pharaoh over Egypt led him to hardening his heart, not listening to the guidance of his own magicians. Pharaoh resisted God until he and Egypt were broken and destroyed by the hand of God. This example helps us understand just how easy it is for pride of self to harden our heart. The nation of Israel throughout its history was accused by God of hardening its heart towards God. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 14 warns us against hardening our hearts against God. To harden our hearts against God is to be so full of pride of self, we won't listen to guidance, counseling from others, especially from God. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 14 also helps us understand how to recognize a wise leader from a self-centered, arrogant leader. A wise leader will have a group of counselors to give the leader advice. The wise leader doesn't just pick people who are yes men to be their advisor. The wise leader will purposefully pick people that don't always agree with them to help strengthen their weaknesses. Whereas a self-centered, egotistical leader picks yes men to be their advisors. Here's an example from the Bible of a young ruler ignoring the wisdom of older men and going with the advice of young men who were like him. Here is 1 Kings chapter 12, 3 to 15. Then they sent and called him, and Jeroboam and all the assembly of Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, Your father made our yoke hard. Now therefore lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke which he put on us, and we will serve you. Then he said to them, Depart for 3 days, then return to me. So the people departed. King Rehoboam consulted with the elders who had served his father Solomon while he was still alive, saying, How do you counsel me to answer this people? Then they spoke to him, saying, If you will be a servant to this people today, and will serve them and grant them their petition, and speak good words to them, then they will be your servants forever. But he forsook the counsel of the elders which they had given him, and consulted with the young men who grew up with him and served him. So he said to them, What counsel do you give that we may answer this people who have spoken to me, saying, Lighten the yoke which your father put on us? The young men who grew up with him spoke to him, saying, Thus you shall say to this people who spoke to you, saying, Your father made our yoke heavy, now you make it lighter for us. But you shall speak to them, My little finger is thicker than my father's loins. Whereas my father loaded you with a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions. Then Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam on the 3rd day, as the king had directed, saying, Return to me on the 3rd day. The king answered the people harshly, for he forsook the advice of the elders which they had given him. And he spoke to them according to the advice of the young men, saying, My father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions. So the king did not listen to the people, for it was a turn of events from the Lord, that he might establish his word, which the Lord spoke through Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. Rehoboam could have listened to the wise counselors who had advised his father Solomon. Think for a moment. Solomon was known for being a wise king and making many wise decisions. Would it not be common sense to listen to men who had learned and grown in wisdom by working with Solomon? Instead, Rehoboam chose to listen to young people like himself, naive in matters of running a nation, and made a decision that led to 10 tribes breaking off from the nation of Israel to forming their own nation. Rehoboam was not a wise leader. In churches today, a wise leader of the governing board, whether it is the pastor or a senior elder, is one who doesn't demand everyone on the board to agree with him. A sign of a wise leader is a person who can work with people who see things different than the leader does and come to a solution that unites people and strengthens the group. The last part of Proverbs 11:14 says, In abundance of counselors there is victory. Team wins a victory over self every time. This is a lesson we all learn. 2 or 3 working together can accomplish more than just one person working alone, regardless of how smart or talented the one person is. A negative example of the teaching of Proverbs 11:14 being ignored is the number of churches being led by one person, being led through a dictator type of leadership, where advice and counselors are not welcome, where the pastor is building their own kingdom instead of the kingdom of God. The next proverb in verse 15 reminds us again of the previous warnings against co-signing for others given in Proverbs chapter 6. He who is a guarantor for a stranger will surely suffer for it, but he who hates being a guarantor is secure. Here in Proverbs chapter 11:15, not only are we warned against guaranteeing someone else's loan or debt, we are told security comes from hating being a guarantee for someone else. Entitlement grows and lives off the back of people guaranteeing the debt or loan of someone else, especially if the someone else is a family member. If the debt or loan is for the family as a whole, then being the guarantee for the debt or loan can be okay. But if the debt or loan is only for a member of the family, not the whole family, then you can be teaching entitlement by guaranteeing the debt or loan for the individual. How does a family help out another family member who is starting out in today's world and doesn't have a credit rating? In that situation, a family member needs to co-sign the loan or debt. If the individual who the debt or loan is for is unable to pay, the family member covers the payment. But just because the family member covered the payment to the lending institution doesn't necessarily mean the person who the loan is for is off the hook, free and clear. They still owe the family member for the cost of the payment. Mercy and love from the cosigner to the person who the loan is for is shown by helping cover what they can't do at that time, extending the time the individual will have to cover their debt. To pay the loan payment without requiring the person who applied for the loan to pay back the family member is the seed of entitlement. When the payment or the whole loan is just taken care of by someone else, the person getting the loan doesn't learn responsibility and integrity. In Proverbs chapter 11, verse 16, Solomon uses the comparison between a woman and a man to get our attention, to help refocus how we are thinking about these proverbs, reading one after another. Proverbs 11:16 says, "A gracious woman attains honor, and ruthless men attain riches." Honor is connected to being gracious towards others. Riches in life is connected to being ruthless. To be ruthless is to not care for the welfare of others. To be ruthless is to put self-advancement, greed, before the welfare of others. To be ruthless is the opposite of being gracious, just as a man is the opposite of a woman. This proverb is talking to a young person about what kind of person do they want to be. Do they want to have honor, or do they want to have riches? It is a rare person who achieves honor and riches at the same time. What is your goal in life? To gain riches or honor? Do you remember what Solomon's goal was shortly after he sat on the throne after his father David's death? Here is 1 Kings chapter 3, 11-13. God said to him, "Because you have asked this thing and have not asked for yourself long life, nor have asked riches for yourself, nor have you asked for the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself discernment to understand justice, behold, I have done according to your words. Behold, I have given you a wise and discerning heart, so that there has been no one like you before you, nor shall one like you arise after you. I have also given you what you have not asked for, both riches and honor, so that there will not be any among the kings like you all your days." Solomon asked for wisdom over both riches and honor. Because Solomon asked for wisdom, God chose to bless Solomon with riches and honor. Solomon had listened to the wisdom of his father David. Solomon grew up under the blessing of God on the life of his father David. Seeing the relationship between God and his father David, Solomon learned wisdom was of greater value than either riches or honor. Excuse me. In Proverbs chapter 11, verse 16, Solomon is teaching his son, Normally, riches and honor do not go together. When they do, it is because of the blessing of God, more so than the abilities of the person. Honor is gained by being gracious to others. Honor is gained by putting others first before self. Riches are gained by choosing to walk in the opposite direction in your life, by placing more value on material things, riches, than people. Doing this will bring you riches at the cost of honor. Choosing to put others before material goods or riches will gain you honor at the expense of riches. Honor and riches are on the opposite ends of the road of life. To focus on the one, you automatically move away from the other. What will help your family more? You being a person of honor or riches? Proverbs chapter 11 verse 17 is connected with Proverbs 11:16. The two proverbs are in close relationship with each other. Proverbs 11:17 says, "The merciful man does himself good, but the cruel man does himself harm." The world and culture of today often sees the giving of mercy as a sign of weakness. To show mercy to someone opens the door for somebody to take advantage of you. This proverb teaches us the opposite of what the world says. When we extend mercy to others, we actually are helping ourselves. Join this truth here in verse 17 to what was just brought out in verse 16. Since showing mercy to others helps the individual giving mercy, honor is to be preferred over riches. To walk the road focused on honor means you will give mercy to others. In doing so, you are actually helping yourself. This is one of the paradoxes of Scripture. By focusing on others, showing mercy, valuing honor over riches, you help self. The cruel person harms himself. To be cruel means to place more value on riches than people. To be cruel means not to extend mercy, but to demand justice, especially at the cost of others. Joining these two proverbs together, we see to focus on riches is to be cruel, and you will end up hurting yourself. The Bible has many examples of this working out in people's lives. Lot chose riches over honor when he chose to leave Abraham and go to the fertile valley by Sodom. 2 Peter chapter 2, 6 through 8 shines a light on Lot for us. And if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to destruction by reducing them to ashes, having made them an example to those who would live ungodly lives thereafter, and if he rescued righteous Lot, oppressed by the sensual conduct of unprincipled men, for by what he saw and heard, that righteous man, while living among them, felt his righteous soul tormented day after day by their lawless deeds. Lot, by choosing the fertile valley by Sodom, Lot brought cruelty into his and his family's life. His righteous soul was tormented day after day because of the choice he had made. Lot had focused on making riches, opening the door for cruelty in his life. By choosing riches over honor, Lot brought cruelty on himself and his family. When we think about self before others, often we are hurting self instead of helping self. Again, one of the paradoxes of the Bible. In order to help self, you have to put others before self. To put self before others, you hurt self, not help self. The Proverbs we have looked at today at first may seem to be common knowledge, but when we study them, we find many people push them away, refusing to listen to them, hardening their heart against God. These proverbs deal with decisions about who we are going to be, about the kind of person we want to be. There is much wisdom in these proverbs. Don't just jump over them with the attitude, I already know that. Spend time prayerfully asking God to show you which way on the highway of life you have been walking, towards honor or towards riches. Seek the advice and counsel of others. Don't wait for them to offer advice. Go to wise people you know and ask for advice. Humble yourself before God and man and see what God will do. May God bless.